port as pride and dignity stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. And, well, I'm afraid it's another Stefan Molyneux reply video. And I know I did put one up just a few days ago. I've got another one here for you now. Now, the reason I've got these two together is basically because they're ideas that occurred to me over the last couple of months to do. I mean, you may have remember if you watch my probe video, I sort of hint a little bit at this because I explain actually one of the scenes. I'm listening to a Molyneux show and I say I'm going to have to do another Stefan Molyneux reply video, and it's true. I didn't do them at the time because basically I was too busy with the new book. But so I'm basically, this is kind of like a bit of a Stefan Molyneux binge at the moment. So I'm tackling two different subjects in consecutive videos, which I've been building up over the last couple of months. Now, so this is about mysticism. What happened was Molyneux has done he did a couple of videos. He did 3 videos. I'm going to reply to 2 of them on the subjects of imagination, fantasy and mysticism. Now, I have tackled him before on what I think are some falsehoods that he exhibited when he was talking about other things such as UFOs and life after death. That's in the first couple of videos I did in reply to him. This is slightly different. This is more general. This is a more general attitude of mysticism. Okay, but we're going to begin with the first of his. These are call-in shows, and the first I'm going to deal with now. There is a single call-in show where both these subjects come up, both the callers I want to reply, both the segments I want to reply to come up. However, it may be easier to go to YouTube because one of them is actually on YouTube and it's easier to listen to it that way. It's called "Is Spellcasting Ethical?" The actual program I'm referring to here is FDR 3851, and the title, he comes up with some good titles sometimes, is "Help, a Turkish Wizard Cast Magic Spells on Me." And that is actually this particular segment we're going to deal with. There's another segment as well which is I'm going to address as well within the same show, which is not on YouTube. So the caller is if you want to listen to the SoundCloud version, she is the third caller, the third and final caller. And if you go to YouTube, it's just a single video which covers the entire call. But her name's Tanya. She is a young Russian woman who is married to a Frenchman. However, their marriage broke up, they split up. She had a relationship with another man, and then she fell in love with a Turkish guy who said he was casting spells on her. And it's a long, complicated story. It involves Tanya behaving sometimes in a very self-destructive manner. For instance, she fasts. Now, fasts can be healthy if you do them for short periods of time in a controlled manner. So, for instance, you don't stop eating altogether and you still drink water and you still drink juices and whatever you have it. She basically stopped eating entirely for 17 days. And quite frankly, she's lucky to be alive after that. It's pretty awful. Anyway, I'm only going to address one. I don't want to talk about her relationships and things like that. I'm just going to address the part of the time when she brings up the subject of mysticism. She is a believer, so-called, a believer in the paranormal and spiritual things, and so she's really on a collision course with Stefan there, because old Steph, he's very much a skeptic, as you know if you've listened to my reply to him about UFOs and life after death and 9/11. So let's start with a segment which is quite late on. It's actually It's actually about 60% of the way through the show, just after the 1 hour mark, where she brings up the subject. She's been hearing voices in her head. So let's start with that.
Some really, some weird whispers, like devil voice, and I didn't pay attention to that, right? So, but
I'm sorry. Where were the voices coming in?
I don't know. It's just something like whispered into my ear.
No, but when did that happen?
Just before I went to Russia. Just, before I left, basically I heard some voices, which I didn't pay much attention to, I just thought it's very weird.
It's usually important to pay attention to voices that you're hearing in your head.
I think it's important, yeah.
I think so.
So you wonder where he's going with this. It's important to pay attention to the voices you're hearing in your head. Yes, but as you'll find out, Stefan has his own view about what might be causing that.
So I heard that, and yeah, it just, I mean, it affected me in some way. And
what
also,
do you remember what the voices were saying to you? What language were they speaking in?
Yeah, I think it was actually something like Turkish type of thing. Yeah, it was something like...
This man she was with, she actually was involved had a relationship with a man from Turkey. And because she starts hearing voices speaking Turkish in her ear, she gets the impression that this man is casting some kind of black magic on her, some kind of black magic spell on her. Now, Stefan and I have a very different view on this issue. I'll let Stefan continue.
Like, I didn't understand at all.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and again, then when I decided to go back to the UK, exactly that very moment, I had my leg broken. You know, without...
I'll just move on forward a little bit from here, because Stefan doesn't really reply properly. He doesn't reply properly, but basically, the hearing of voices... when you hear voices in your ears, you actually hear voices. There are several different causes of this. Now, it's true that people can experience auditory hallucinations, and there are several conditions which can actually cause this. For instance, schizophrenia. However, the idea that the voices in your hearing a voice is always basically an internal matter. It's simply a creation of the mind, and it has no objective reality, I think is false. Now, there's several. It is false. Although, I mean, there is the issue of the bicameral mind. Now, I don't know how many of you looked into this, but Andrew Power, who wrote Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs, he mentioned this because the bicameral mind. Bicameral means having two rooms. Now, this is a big subject, and I can't go into complete detail here, but Power believes, and there's several researchers believe, there was a time in the past where it was normal for people to have bicameral minds, in which case they were actually two separate thought narratives going on in their head at the same time. And the experience of having these two separate thought narratives could sometimes be exhibited as hearing a voice. It would feel like there was someone else inside your mind speaking to you. And some researchers believe that this is where the legends come from, of people conversing with God. Now, of course, I don't know whether or not you believe in God or not. If you do, then you probably pray and you say, God, and you'll find that you don't actually. God doesn't say, "I got you, mate. Yeah, I heard you. I'll work on it." Okay, that doesn't happen. It may do in some cases, but it's very, very rare that your prayers are answered literally like that. However, if you go to the Bible and you read the stories of people such as Moses and Abraham, you'll find that they actually have dialogue with God. They say something and God answers them back. I mean, the most famous one is Job. Job's a prophet who he suffered enormous trouble in his life. He had a very, very unhappy life because God actually did this deliberately. God actually gave him an unhappy life and made him miserable. All kinds of things. He made his house burn down, made his business fail, made his farm become blighted by locusts, made his wife run off with another man, things like that. And Job then says to God, why are you doing this to me? And then God answers in a very sarcastic and bitter way, and he talks about his own. It's one of the rare times in the Bible where God talks about himself. But it's definitely there's a conversation here going on, which is something you often get in ancient texts. Yet it doesn't happen in the modern world to most people. And some researchers have led that to believe that at the time the Bible stories were created, people had, or more people had bicameral minds, whereas now we don't. So what this woman might be experiencing, Tanya, is she might actually have a bicameral mind. In which case, Stefan is partly correct. It is a kind of auditory hallucination, but the term hallucination implies some kind of pathology, like you're taking drugs or you've been breathing gas or something, and you start seeing things going around your head, and you start hearing voices in your ear. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Okay, well, so it implies it's pejorative sort of feel to it, the word hallucination. But maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe these what we call hallucinations are actually, firstly, they're not always bad things to have. I mean, I've talked before about ayahuasca and about various ways that very shamanic practices that supposed hallucination or being in a state of mind, a state of consciousness that can manifest hallucination is actually a very, very important way of gaining knowledge and power. And Stefan's going to talk an awful lot about knowledge and power in this little conversation. Yeah, there was actually and I mean this kind of ties into what I was talking about in a previous film, my review of Drop Dead Fred, where I talk about imaginary friends. Is it possible that the bicameral mind and something, maybe an offshoot of that, explains why children experience imaginary friends? And that rather than these things being some kind of ephemeral illusion, they're actually saying something very fundamental about the nature of the universe and our own consciousness and how it relates to it. I do recommend Anthony Peake, because Anthony Peake has written lots of books about this, and he essentially has come up with his own theory of something similar to the bicameral mind. He believes that the mind is split into two parts: the eidolon, which is your conscious self, your ego self, and the daemon. And the daemon is like what some people in the New Age call your higher self. It's a part of your mind, but it can see beyond what you can, because it exists. It exists in a non-physical sense. It can see. It knows the future, for example. It knows your past lives, things like that. So there was actually used to be a website called hearingvoices.com. I wonder if it's still there. Let's just have a look. I'm just going to Google it and find out. Sorry, this mouse isn't working. Actually, move the mouse cable out of the way of the tripod. Hang on. Hearing Voices. Yes, it is. Hearingvoices.org. The website is there. Hearing Voices Network for people who hear voices, see visions, or have other unusual perceptions. And I hope it's actually a. So I'm glad it's still there. Maybe I can't read through it now to you, but I mean this. I'm glad the website is still there. I last looked at that a long time ago. But again, maybe it may be an idea to actually deal with this kind of phenomenon in a sensible way. By sensible, I mean taking it seriously and not dismissing it without evidence, without any reason to dismiss it, or just assume that it's something. It's just something that's gone wrong that needs to be eradicated, or it's something you need to cure yourself of. Because that's the attitude many people have to imaginary friends. And Stefan, it just seems, has this attitude. I'm just going to move forward to the next bit now, which I've noted. Here we go. This is when he actually gets into the subject of magic and things like that. Here we go. So it's 107.13. We go. I'll put it up. I'll full screen it because I've got the time slider here. Here we go. Right, back a bit. Okay.
He put me in a situation when I was completely vulnerable, exhausted, heartbroken.
So you think that he cast spells on you to drive you away from your husband and...
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, but absolutely.
It's this Turkish guy. She reckons that he actually used black magic on her. He put a spell on her.
But there's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as spells.
There's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as spells. Actually, I've got to mention something else. Hang on, I've got to mention something else. When it comes to sort of like hearing voices, I remember there's something else I've got to tell you about what I was talking about just now, and I'll get that out of the way. Then we'll move on to what Stefan's saying now. I'll just rewind slightly. 1 second, because I'm sorry to mix you up. It wasn't my intention to mix you up, guys. Okay, right. There's also, when it comes to hearing voices, there's also the issue of targeted individuals. A voice-to-skull technology. It is possible to make someone hear voices in their head using various various radio transmissions and electronics. And I'll be doing more about this in future programs, because I'm actually in the process of making several videos with Kieran Lee Perrin, and will be in fact some of them might be uploaded to his channel, in which case I'll post links on her Panway Voice. But there is a method. I mean, this is not actually just secret government stuff. There's a patent for this. Richard Sauder talks about this. But it's possible to use electronic signals that energize the aural nerves. That's the nerves which serve the ears and connect them to your brain, and the parts of your brain which deal with auditory stimuli, that is, information coming through sound in the ears. This technology has actually been developed in the white world, openly, in medical research, to create a new generation of hearing aids. So, see, technology is not good or bad. Technology can be good or bad. It's a tool. It depends who's using it. So we use this technology to create a new generation of hearing aids that are very effective, because they can actually take sound and they can actually bypass, if there's anything wrong with your ears, they actually bypass it and stimulate the brain directly, bypassing the damaged organs, and so it will allow deaf people to hear. Very, very clever indeed. But of course, this technology is also being abused by the shadow government, and it can be used to make you hear false things. It can make be made to make you hear things which aren't there. Even voices telling you to kill yourself and things like that. There's been a number of murders, I believe, that have possibly been a result of this particular weapon, and it is a weapon. It's a psychological warfare weapon. Okay, now let's listen. Let's listen why Stefan doesn't believe in magic.
Completely
So
vulnerable,
recapping slightly.
exhausted, heartbroken.
So you think that he cast spells on you to drive you away from your husband, and
Absolutely. I mean, yeah,
but
absolutely.
There's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as spells.
Well, is there? That's the question. Stefan says there's not. And in a moment he's going to give him his reasons why. But firstly, I should point out that I actually do think there's such a thing as black magic. I have experienced it myself, I believe. So I'm rather like Tanya in this sense. There's several events I could think of. One in particular was when I stayed at a friend's house. This was a friend who told me that she was under attack. She was under psychic attack. Now, I'm open to the idea of psychic attack, but I didn't believe her because I thought she can tell tall stories sometimes, and I thought this was just another example of that. One night in her house I just stayed as a guest in her house, just sleeping on the settee. One night in that house convinced me otherwise. I felt ill. I've had nightmares. I came out of that house trembling, in a fever, and there was something very, very nasty going on in that house. And this is a young woman who I think has a bad choice of friends. She often hangs around with people who are into black magic, and she's got into a lot of trouble with them because they've done rituals involving her. She hasn't told me everything yet. I'm not going to tell you who this person is. I think she wants to remain nameless, but I know that she's been involved in sex rituals with these people. It's extremely unhealthy, and it is real. I know what Stefan's about to say, but I'm going to explain to you why I think it is real. And I don't know specifically whether what Tanya is experiencing is real or whether she is just imagining it. But for Stefan to say there's no such thing as magic, okay, it just doesn't exist, is incorrect.
So, Stefan, I started researching this topic, and basically...
Yeah, see, I started researching. You can't see this. He actually rolls his eyes at this point. I'm just watching the video right now. He goes, I've researched it. So listen to what she has to say. Listen to her research.
Basically, we are all connected to the universe, about vibrations. You probably know about vibrations. Vibrational.
Yeah, we're connected to the universe, vibrations. This is an idea of spiritual. This is a spiritual issue. Now, you hear a lot of this in the New Age. You hear it in some kinds of Oriental mysticism. But the idea that humans are a part of a sentient universe, I think is perfectly plausible.
No frequencies.
Oh yeah, I use them every time I speak. They're in my throat.
Those are mechanical vibrations. That is sound waves, and that's something totally different. And I think Stefan is he's extracting the urine slightly at this point, I would say.
Yeah, they're not just in your throat. It's how you're connected to the universe.
What does that mean, connected to the universe? Like a big umbilical, or what do you mean?
Funny enough, it is slightly like a big umbilical. People like, you know, Charles Lindbergh, the pilot, and other people who've experienced out-of-body sensations have... Charles Lindbergh was an aviator. He was the first man to fly across the Atlantic Ocean single-handed in 1927 in a single journey. And he was suffering from lack of sleep because he was flying this plane. And he had an out-of-body experience. He rose out of his body, and he had a body made of light. But it was connected to the other body by what he called a silver thread, a silver cable coming out of his back, connecting him to the body. He could see himself flying the plane. Very interesting story, and there's been many other examples of that. So it is like an umbilical cord in a way.
Like, you know, third eye opening, 8 chakras.
No,
Third eye chakras. Again, this is she's getting into the New Age area here, and but there is something again. These are old ideas that can be found in the ancient world. I mean, they go back to prehistoric times, especially in India, places like that, and they may very well be an expression of something real. For example, the third eye is sometimes thought to refer to the pineal gland, a tiny little structure, tiny little organ in the centre of your brain. Just you can't feel it; it's right in the middle. You can never see it or feel it, but it is René Descartes, the famous philosopher in France, decided he thought that this was where the soul connected to the body. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that it's Dr. Rick Strassman and several other people have done experiments, and Graham Hancock and that have talked about this, about how the pineal gland is very important in the altering the states of consciousness that the brain can experience. And strangely enough, what happens to your pineal gland function actually decreases as you get older because calcium builds up in it. It becomes basically ridden with limescale, almost like a pipe, a water pipe. Now, one of the things that increases that calcification very, very quickly is fluoride, exposure to fluoride. And there's fluoride is being put in our water, it's in our toothpaste, and maybe that's in order to shut this thing down, but I'm going off on a tangent now, so I have to stop and continue with this program. But I've done an article about this, and I could do I've done videos about this as well, I think, or I've mentioned it in videos. But this is what the third eye means. But anyway, Stefan is looking very sceptical now. He's got that sceptical look on his face.
I mean, I know that there are theories. I've done some yoga, but I'm not sure what you mean in terms of all connected to the universe.
Well, yoga's very old, Stefan. Yoga, there's an image of like a divinity squatting in the yoga position from Mohenjo-daro, the ancient Indus Valley civilization, and this is like over 5,000 years old. And it's very, very old. It's very ancient. Yoga is.
If we're connected to the universe, why are we using Skype?
I know of course he's kidding. Skype is like a telephone. It's a way of communicating normally in normal real time using sound waves and electronics. Okay, your sound waves go into the microphone turns them into an electronic digital signal, goes down the wire to the other end, it then appears in the person's earphone. Okay, why are we just I know Stefan's taking the piss, but I think it has to be said. If he's going to be that sort of like obtuse, then so shall I.
Have you heard about the law of attraction?
The law of attraction?
Yes.
I've heard that pretty people think that the universe is conforming to them when what really happens is men want to have sex with them.
Now, this is a subject he's going to bring up several times, right? And I think he's being oversimplistic here. And he's got a point, but not exact. But now, the law of attraction is the idea that you may have seen The Secret, or What the Bleep Do We Know? And again, this is something I know Slacker doesn't agree with this, but there is an element of truth to this, which is your state of mind does affect your physical experience in this world. and he's going to bring up a couple of other issues during this conversation. I'll go into it in more detail, but basically there is evidence to suggest that your thoughts do actually influence the world around you, and that is sometimes called the law of attraction. I've certainly experienced it in my life. I've certainly noticed that my mindset does influence things, especially when it comes to relationships with other people. I'm not just talking about, well, I'm being in a bad mood, so they're reacting to my bad mood. I'm talking about things just happening to me. There was one instance where I think I've told this story before, but I was with some friends of mine, and we got into an argument. I lost my temper, and I poured a can of beer over his head. It's a long time ago. We actually made it up the next day, but and I walked off down the road in a huff. And I went down, turned down the corner, walked along the road. Some people were there. One of them came over and punched me in the face. It was literally less than a minute after I'd attacked my friend. So in a sense, my own internal rage created a situation. I mean, I've walked down that road 1,000 times before and 1,000 times since. I've never been punched in the face once, apart from that day. And it's very, very odd. It was a very weird thing. It felt like almost like punishment for what I'd done. And there's many, many other examples I could give you where my general mindset does affect the world around me. Not always. Not completely. It doesn't mean everything that happens to me is my fault. I mean, this is where sometimes I think the skeptics and the New Agers get too literal on both ends of the debate. Because Slaxer will say things like, well, no, I've seen starving kids in Africa, fighting over cow dung. I've seen that too many times to believe all this rubbish about law of attraction. Or you get New Age people saying, I made that happen. I mean, this car came and it crashed into me, and well, it's my fault because I created that situation. Well, it's both those polarities are wrong. Okay, it's not, you don't create everything in your life, but it influences your life. Anyway, I'll carry on. I mean, he made a joke using Skype. Yeah, it's a completely different thing. Anyway, I'll carry on.
No. So basically, we are connected to the universe, right? And we vibrate.
I don't know what that means. You say this like you know what it...
Well, don't interrupt her. She's in the middle of explaining, Stefan.
I know what it means. I don't know what that means.
It basically means that... how can I explain that? I mean...
All right. She's having trouble explaining it, so yeah. All right, maybe Stefan, she was right to ask for clarification there. But I mean, she will say a few things,
Basically, magic comes from the word magnetic. So we're all like magnets.
I'm not sure that's true, actually, magic. Where does the word come from? I'll just have a look. But she's got a right good point when he talks about magnet. Yeah. Magic, etymology. Okay. Right, it's Persian. It has several. It's magic origin, etymology. It's from Middle English magic, from Old French magique, Latin magicus, originally ancient Greek magicus, ultimately from Old Persian, derived from Proto-Indo-European. So yeah, it's the word magic has come from a long route through ancient Persian, through Greek to Latin, to French, to English. And it's to be able to help to power sorcerer, displaced native Middle English dwomancraft, dwemer, and then it talks about, it's related, it's a subject, it's actually not related to magnetism. The magnetism has a very, very, I think is different. I'll just look at magnetism. Right, magnetism, etymology. Magnet. Okay. Old French magnet, Latin magnetium, ancient Greek magnesian, either after the Lydian city of Magnesia. Yeah, it's actually, so it's got a different etymology. So the words magic and magnetic are not connected. However, I think what the point she's trying to make is still valid, because the way magic works can be an analogy of magnetism. You know, I mean, if you've ever seen the film The Secret, you'll see that the people are giving out like these waves of things, and they look a bit like magnetic flux, because it's very similar to you, because you attract the attraction and repulsion thing. It's a good analogy. It's a good meta. I think magnetic, the behaviour of magnets is a good metaphor for what we're talking about here.
Right? Physics. We all vibrate at different frequencies. So
No. You can't put magic and physics together. Magic is a violation of the laws of physics by definition.
No, it's not. Magic is, to quote Arthur C. Clarke, is perhaps something that is indistinguishable from Arthur Clarke said that any sufficiently high technology is indistinguishable from magic. Maybe what we could say, perhaps it's better to define science rather than magic being, the opposite of science. So I'll let him
It's like saying thing and opposite of thing. You can't squish.
What we describe as magic may be just something that has not been understood by science at the moment. Maybe it's, as J.B.S. Haldane said, it may be beyond our ability to actually comprehend. And maybe this is one of those things. Or it's maybe something that we can comprehend but we haven't worked out yet. Okay. I think a lot of what we call magic might come under those categories. So it's not a contradiction of science at all. It is. I mean, there's a time when lightning could be described as magic. And indeed it was. It was thought of people being struck down by an angry god. What it was in fact was it was an electrical discharge caused by potential difference between the ground and the sky. But before people understood that, you could call it magic. Then people understood it was no longer called as magic. But it's still the same phenomenon. And possibly what we call magic is a part of that. And maybe when we get to grips with it, there'll be no need to redefine it. So again, Stefan is being I think he's being a bit too literal here.
Squish together magic and physics. You have to try some other way to explain it.
Okay, magic comes from the word magnetic. Magnets. Is it physics for you or not?
Is magnetics physics?
Yes.
Well, sure, but etymology is not physics. Like where a word comes from isn't physical proof of anything. I mean, the word elf exists, but I don't expect pointy-haired people with no beards to show up at my house.
Does anyone know where he lives? Could you dress up like one of those elves and knock on his door? No, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Because then that's harassment, isn't it? Yeah, dressing up as an elf and turning up at his doorstep is harassment. So, no, please, don't dress up as an elf and go and see Stefan Molyneux, please. All right, I shouldn't have said that.
So, by your thoughts and by your words, you can attract, you can affect a person's life.
No, gosh.
And your
Listen,
own reality.
Tanya,
Yes.
do you not understand how this works yet? Go to some old, ugly man and tell him that by his thoughts he
She's going to an old, ugly man.
can attract
Oh, sorry, that was naughty, Ben. You shouldn't have said that. That was naughty, being rude to Stefan.
things in the universe. On the other hand, go to a young, hot woman and say, by her thoughts, you can attract things in the universe. I think you're mistaking the word tits for thoughts.
No. There is a difference between tits and thoughts, alright? Although my thoughts are very often about tits, I do understand the difference. Now he's coming on to this thing about sexual market value and are you at 8 or a 10 or whatever, and then he kind of picks up this ball and runs with it to a bit further than he should. I'll let him explain and I'll pick him up on it.
You can attract things in the universe. The universe seems to align to you because you're a young, attractive, fertile woman and men want to have sex with you.
Now this is... Yeah, what his point is that basically because Tanya is an attractive woman. Now he's never seen. I don't know if he's ever seen a picture of Tanya. I haven't either. I just hear her voice. She described herself as young and pretty, and Stefan then has this idea that because of that, she kind of has what he calls young pretty girl privilege, which means that people will be nice to her just because they want to shag her. Or young men will be nice to her just because they want to shag her. Now, there may be an element of truth to that in a sense that she's going to get complimented by lots of guys if she's pretty. However, I think he is being... I'll let him carry on a bit, because I'll let him go into more details.
It's not magic. It's eggs.
Okay, so you tell me that spells...
Spells are not real. They don't exist.
They don't exist.
There's no
Absolutely
scientific
no.
evidence for magic spells. If there was, it wouldn't be magic or spells.
Well, there is, actually. I'll come on to that in a minute. But there is scientific evidence for what he's describing, and he'll actually be a bit more specific in a moment. And I'll wait till he becomes more specific, and then I will give you some more details.
They don't exist. Now, this isn't to say that words don't have big effects. Like if you can convince someone that they're crap, and if you can convince someone that you can save them, you can get resources. You can convince someone that a God exists. Maybe they'll give you money. If you can convince someone that you're right all the time, maybe they'll change their behavior. You know, like, I mean, I speak for a living. My words...
I've got to forward wind a bit. Sorry, I went a bit too far there. Where was I? Let me just go to my notes. 11, okay, I've got to go forward to 11:35. I'm almost there anyway now. Hang on. I don't just play the whole thing, because there's only little bits of it that are actually interesting. There we go. Okay, I'll go there. Okay, let's play this.
Spells. What happens is that young women in particular don't get contradicted very much because men want to have sex with them. We don't tell you that you're wrong because it will interfere with our access to your vagina.
He's always so literal, isn't he? I've got to go on to 12:05, but no, I'll let Cal.
And so you've gone through life, and you said when you were growing up as a kid, your parents didn't say no to you much, right?
Correct.
Right. So your parents didn't say no to you much. Men are tripping all over themselves because you're physically very attractive and they want to have sex with you. You think that's love? It's not.
No, there's Stefan's often accused of being a misogynist, but I think he's a bit of a misandrist sometimes, because this is actually painting men in a pretty bad light. He often talks like this. I mean, for him, you know, sexual attraction is a very, very it's a very crude, a rather rough and easily explicable thing, which is very, very simple. Everybody has a number between 1 and 10, which is their level of physical attractiveness, and he won't accept, if you try to say there's a subjective element to physical attractiveness, he won't let you get away with it. He'll just keep pushing and pushing, like I was talking about in the last programme. He can badger you. He can just say, no, I want an explanation for that, and he'll go on at you like that. And he'll say things like, yeah, well, the only reason, basically, the whole process of falling in love and is all about reproduction. And yes, on one level that's true. There is an element of this. Of course, we feel sexual attraction for others. We fall in love. We form couples because we need to reproduce. That is at one level it is. But he sees everything, all more subtle factors in that process that lie within that or above it as epiphenomenal, non-existent, delusion. He once said something in a previous show. I can't remember which one it is, but he said, "Oh, you know, if ever the government set up a ministry of whoredom, as in whore, prostitute, so that every male citizen got visited every few days by a beautiful woman of his choice and had to have sex with her, there wouldn't be much romance in the world, would there?" And I think to myself, well, why not? Is it really just about that? And I mean, I consider myself a perfectly healthy, red-blooded guy. I think I've got a pretty good sex drive myself, and I think I do. If I won't go into details, but I can tell you I do. All right, very much so. And I don't behave in that manner. I don't believe I talk to women or even flirt with women simply for that reason. Of course, there's an element to that, but it's so much more than that. I can enjoy a woman's company on a purely platonic basis. I have very, very many good platonic female friends, women that I like, and sometimes I find attractive, but I just enjoy talking to them, and I have no intention of trying to seduce them. And this thing about non-contradiction, you don't contradict women. You don't contradict women if you want to sleep with them, because if you contradict them, you won't get they're cut off. They talks about resources and sexual and access to sex and things like this, and he sees it very simply as a kind of deal between men and women. And I think he sees it in a very sort of monolithic and very superficial manner. This is something he comes back to in almost every show he does in some way or another, especially the call-in shows. I've got a perfect example. Now there's I better not name her actually. There is a woman who is quite a big name in the UFO scene. She's not a young lady. She's quite old and she's somewhat overweight, but she is extremely alluring sexually, and she's, in terms of on the Molyneux scale, she probably gets a 1 or 2, but I'd give her a 10. And why is it? Does that mean there's something wrong with me? Because this is what I mean by the scale. The Molyneux scale is wrong. It doesn't take into account the complexities of sexual attraction. This is a woman that I've always admired, actually, since I first met her. I met her in 2007 at Probe. I've always met her. I've always admired her. And now, despite this, I mean, according to Molyneux, I would never contradict her because I want to sleep with her. And I do want to sleep with her, actually. But I was actually on a radio show with her a few years ago, where we actually got into she said something that I vehemently disagreed with. And do you know what I did? I didn't say, yes, yep, sure, I'm not going to contradict you. I'm not going to contradict you because then I'll end up in bed with you. No. I replied to her and I disputed her. And it became quite heated. We didn't fall out or anything like that, but we had quite a heated debate, and in no way did I give her an inch. Sorry, I've got to try and avoid double entendres in this discussion. I didn't give her an inch. I didn't give her any more than that. I'd like to give her all 12 of my inches, actually. God blimey, it's so easy to fall into this sort of carry-on film gutter talk, isn't it? No, I didn't give an inch of ground to her when she was disagreeing with me. And it's I won't. I should have named the person. No, I'm not going to name the person. All right, but it's an old. It's still around somewhere, the recording, but it's an old thing. But anyway, what I mean to say is that he looks. Stefan can look down his nose at people sometimes, and he generalises people. He sometimes says derogatory things about women, and in this case, he's saying something very derogatory about men. And I think that's unfair. So we'll let him continue.
It's not. That doesn't mean you can't be loved.
Hang on, I've got to go forward a bit. Hang on, I've got to go forward a bit. Where are we? Right, 1:12:42. Right. Oh, it's only got a few. I might as well play it because it's only a few seconds.
And you have had parents who have, in many ways, it sounds like, taken away your responsibility.
So this is all about the stuff
they say, well,
she was talking about earlier in the show. Because
no, you made those choices. Maybe
because this is about the relationship between her and her. She's this idiot French guy she got married to. Anyway, and her parents and things like that.
Who thinks he's got magic spells over you, and you're messaging him, and so you're making bad decisions. But you think this is the universe? You think this is magic? No, you're making bad decisions. Now you.
Okay, she may be making bad decisions, Stefan, and you've got to realise that just because people believe in the supernatural doesn't mean. I mean, he's going to come back later and claim that belief in the supernatural is a way of avoiding responsibility and taking away personal accountability and power. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll just let him continue.
You can make better decisions, and you can be the kind of person that a rational, sane, healthy man could fall in love with, but you gotta stop all this woo-woo. crap.
Woo-woo crap. Let me just go back a bit, hang on. Because he talks about woo-woo crap. Now I'm going to come. He comes on to a different subject now. Hang on, but I'll just go back a little bit. There we go.
Decisions, and you can make better decisions.
Yeah. Now, no one is disputing, and I'm not disputing, that personal responsibility in making decisions is vitally important. I don't know why. I don't understand the very, very black and white way Stefan sees this. It's not about. I don't think it is about avoiding responsibility. It can be when taken to extremes. I think some people in the New Age, for example, do. And I mean, I've known some New Age people who I think, funnily enough, the most New Age person I've ever met was also a very, very nasty, very destructive and spiteful person. I remember. But there is an element of that in the extreme New Age. But again, this is marginalising. I mean, you can't just. He did this before over the life after death thing. If you go back down, just follow the links in the description box back to when I did that, because I always put links in the description box to my previous video with Stefan. So I think it was the third or second video I did it with him, where he talks about life after death, and he takes a case which is complicated and which is interesting, and he strawmans it. He turns it into a husk of what it should be. And he's doing it this time. I'll let him carry on, because he starts talking about woo-woo crap, and then he really gives me something to get my teeth into.
And you can be the kind of person that a rational, sane, healthy man could fall in love with, but you gotta stop all this woo-woo crap, all this mystical crap.
Well, woo-woo crap, mystical crap, yes. Those words are what? Well, to quote your favourite expression, Stefan, that's not an argument. I'll let him continue, because he does produce an argument now.
Because any sane man, when you start talking about vibrations and chakras and connection to the universe, any sane man is going to leave like a wily coyote-sized hole in the door getting away.
Yeah, like the plane on 9/11, Stefan. Oh, God, I'm going back to ancient history now.
There's no magic.
Stefan, what is that enlightenment for you?
What is
that a person enlightened person? You know, enlightenment.
Enlightenment? I mean,
yes.
It's
what
a
is it?
period in history when the scientific method expanded, but I don't know about enlightenment. I like the word truth. I like the word.
Well, we're talking about two different things here. The Enlightenment was a period in history in which it's generally regarded to be, I think, sometime during the 18th century, when science and rationality became more important. It rose above religious faith in determining where society was going. The Enlightenment led to scientific discoveries. It led to various philosophical ideas, and ethics in particular was very important. The Enlightenment led to things such as the abolition of slavery and things like that. Things which had never been questioned before, like whether slavery was the right thing to do or not, because people just believed religion, and that's a good thing. And I think if it weren't for the Enlightenment, we'd still be effectively in the middle in a society with the technology of the Middle Ages and the values of the Middle Ages today. Now, I think what Tanya's talking about is Enlightenment is the way it's meant in various Oriental mystical ideas. For instance, Buddhism. The word Buddha means the enlightened one, and the Buddha was not originally called the Buddha. He was called Prince Gautama. Yet he became the Buddha when he achieved enlightenment. So they're talking about two different concepts now. But the Buddhist idea of enlightenment is different to the historical period called the Enlightenment. The idea of Buddhist enlightenment is as a way of transcending the earthly experience with its suffering and finding a higher existence. The Buddha famously, he squatted under a tree for a number of years, for a number of days until he became enlightened. I'll let Stefan continue.
Honest. I like the word factual. I like the word empirical.
Well, so do I. Honest, truth, factual, empirical. But this is where he gets into the skeptic idea, because he's going to bring things up now which he thinks are not don't have those values.
I don't know about enlightenment. Enlightenment seems like, well, it's bullshit, but I'm going to put a different word on it.
No, it doesn't. It's not. That's completely false. If you look into things such as Buddhism, it's much, much more much more serious, and I think is worthy of more respect than this.
Like, I don't care about enlightenment. I care about something that's true. And there's no such thing as magic.
There's no such thing as magic, isn't there?
They've tried all of these experiments. Magic, prayer, all of these things. No effect. No effect whatsoever. Voodoo doesn't exist, magic doesn't exist, spells don't exist, witches don't exist, ghosts and goblins don't exist. And you are surrendering.
Right. Let's start. He's interested in truth and facts and rationality and things like that. So am I. So let's look at this. Prayer. He mentions prayer doesn't exist. I don't know anything about voodoo, but I'm looking at a paper now. Scientific evidence for the efficacy of prayer, 2005, Dr. Peter Fenwick. Now I brought this up on other videos, but it is a scientific study which showed that praying for people actually does have an effect. It doesn't mean that God exists. It doesn't mean that necessarily God exists, but it means a specific mental intent has an effect on the subject of that person who's been. For instance, this was a hospital study that Fenwick was involved in, and there's multiple references here, multiple references right along here. So this is a properly controlled scientific study, in which he got people to pray for people in hospital so they would get better quicker. And it turns out that the people in hospital didn't know they were being prayed for, so there was no placebo effect. But it turned out there was a result from this. And Fenwick's study, I think, shows that there is such thing as stuff like this. Now, he mentioned ghosts as well. Now, there's no need for me to repeat what I've said about ghosts. He says, there's no such thing as ghosts. There have been scientific experiments. It hasn't been proved. Yes, it has, you see. It has. I also refer you to this book, Entangled Minds, by Dr. Dean Radin. This is a very, very interesting book, which talks about the various scientific endeavours that have been done in researching things such as the law of attraction, specific mental intent, and all these other things that Stefan is poo-pooing. Okay, so that's... Let's let him continue.
Your power to a fantasy, to a delusion.
No, it's not. He said surrendering your power to a fantasy and a delusion. Well, if it's not a delusion, then what's she surrendering? This is just an extension of logical ideas. She just has an interest in something which you think is not true, but she thinks is. You can't go from there to say she's surrendering her power and responsibility. Okay, this goes back to what his big long rant in the life after death thing, where he talks about Pink Floyd and smoking weed and stuff like that, and divorcing yourself from reality. Completely and utterly unfair.
And it's dangerous, Tanya. It's dangerous. Because if you start to believe in this stuff, really believe in it, sounds like you're kind of down that path already.
Stefan, when you hear something...
To believe in it? Well, what's wrong with believing in it if it's true? I mean, do you believe 2 and 2 equals 4? Stefan, if you believe 2 and 2 equals 4, then is that wrong? Is that dangerous to believe that? Because 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4, does it? So therefore, you're believing in something false. This is not right. This is not right. And Tanya's going to answer him now.
Something whispering into your ear, and then some events in your life happening.
I don't know if you heard her. She's got a strong Russian accent, but Tanya's now referring to the voices in her ear again. And this is the voices she heard.
That you start thinking about it, Stefan. I mean,
You're not thinking about it. You're accepting it. You're accepting that there's some answer called magic spells.
Because I experienced it myself.
What did you experience? The sound of a voice in your ear?
Yes.
I write novels. Of course you have voices in your ear. We have dialogue and arguments with ourselves all the time.
No.
That's different, okay? I'm a writer too. What the voices that Stefan's talking about are the process of creative imagination. It's a totally different thing. I think he's being sort of, like I say, he's deliberately, he's taking the mickey again, like he was before about when he talked about Skype and about enlightenment and things like that.
which was a different one. It's not in your head, it's in your ear. It's like it was something.
So you had an auditory hallucination. People.
Again, I've covered this before. I mean, Stefan brings up the same point several times. I'll try not to repeat myself. But is it an auditory hallucination or not? I mean, I was saying earlier on how it may not be as simple as that. It may not be as simply as a disorder in your head which causes you to hear something.
People have visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations. It's not fantastically rare. So you go and get yourself checked out neurologically, and if there's nothing wrong, you say, well, there was just a hiccup in my brain. I had a kind of waking dream. Maybe there was somebody whispering some distance away, and the way that the sound bounced around the stone square I was in, it kind of sounded like it was in my ear. Or you just chalk it up to something happened, doesn't matter. My wires got crossed. I had a kind of deja vu. I had an auditory recall. I had a waking dream. It's not real. It's not like someone in Turkey is whispering in your ear, unless you're on the phone. It's not real. And it's dangerous to think that it is, because it detaches you from simple, clear, basic, direct reality, which is where your power is.
However, if such things are a part of direct reality, then it's not unempowering to actually accept them. And I mean, I don't know specifically if this Turkish wizard was actually the person causing her to hear these things in her ear. However, as I said, magic exists. The ability to cast spells exists. And it's possible that this is actually what was happening to her, and I think it should be taken seriously. Obviously, Stefan is right that he says this earlier in the broadcast, but he's right when he said that she should have nothing to do with this guy. However, I don't dismiss the idea that he might have used some kind of occult process to attack her.
And what it does is, by mistaking lust for love, you think that you have a virtue.
I'm going to move forward a little bit because he goes on. Right, here we go. So we'll go forward to 1 hour 22 and 15. Right. Okay, go back a bit. I can't get it bang on because of this. Okay, because
it was not my husband.
Because you can't get it bang on because this is a big long thing and there's a slider here. I'll just put it on full screen. But okay, so
so you got to not go down this mystical rabbit hole. You probably will, but I'm going to warn you anyway, and warn everyone else out there. I'm telling you, Tanya, I have seen where this rabbit hole leads. It leads to a life of loneliness and despair and hysteria and self-justification and responsibility avoidance, and fundamentally, in the end, you know what it takes from you? The most precious thing you have, your free will.
He says he's seen where this leads. Well, maybe he has seen some people who have experienced negative effects of being involved in these things that he thinks don't exist. However, he obviously doesn't know that much about it, otherwise he'd know about, well, he would know. For instance, I said, this is the criticism I made of him during the UFO and the 9/11 and the life after death thing. He hasn't examined the subject in enough detail. You know, and I mean, sure, he's got an awful lot. Maybe he has like 4 callers a night. He can't look at every single thing in ultimate detail in order to have a proper debate about it. But then, in that case, fair enough. I understand that. But then, in which case you should take a step back and realise you don't know everything about it, and therefore don't be so swift to dismiss it from a position of such a low level of knowledge.
Because what happens is it all becomes, am I in tune with the universe? What does my heart say? You never actually end up making a damn choice.
But you do, you see. You can use this knowledge to make choices. It can actually help you make choices. Once you accept it exists. After my experience when I got angry with my friend and I poured beer over his head and got punched in the face, this was one of the things that essentially shook me up and realised I'd been a bit of a dickhead. And I went round his house the next day and I apologised and we made up immediately. And he actually apologised to me because he felt that he provoked me at the time of the beer, and we both calmed down by then and we made up, and we're still friends to this day. I think if it hadn't been for that understanding, I'd have just felt myself a victim. I'd have just thought, oh, aren't I unlucky? You know, I get punched in the face just after having the row with my friend. Oh dear, oh woe is me. and I don't think, I probably wouldn't have reacted in the same way. Yet the experience and the awareness of what it was, and I think I wrote, I used to keep diary in those days, and I wrote that there was some kind of divine justice to the world. It's one of the things that inspired me to go and apologise to my friend. So Stefan is completely wrong here, totally wrong.
And this is what you're trying to sell to me. Well, the heart wants what the heart wants. Well, we were in proximity, we had these conversations, what could I do? No. You can't just be dragged around by your heart and your loins like some guy tied up behind a pickup truck on a dirt road. I mean, you can be, but it's scarcely...
It's all coming out now, Stefan. Is that what you get up to in your free time? Does your wife know?
Elevated. It's scarcely enlightened, right?
Yes.
Right, do I finish?
And the end result of mysticism is a living death. It is a soullessness.
Living death, soullessness. My goodness me. This is how Ayn Rand talks. That's really over the top, even by skeptic standards. You know, that's really extreme. You know, the words living death are only used for the most awful experiences in life that life can possibly deliver.
It is a need that will never be filled. It is what Gabor Mate talks about in The Realm of the Hungry Ghost. It's the ghost that every time it eats, it gets hungrier.
Now, the hungry ghost concept exists in Buddhism, but what do you call the realm of the hungry ghost? Let's just look that up. The realm of the hungry ghost. Audio. Gabor Mate. That's right. Okay. What's this? Is it? It's Amazon pages. Goodreads. Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate is something of a compassion machine, diligently treating the drug addicts of Vancouver's notorious downtown East Side with sympathy in his heart and legislative reform. Oh right, he's a kind of a... Yeah, it's about, I think it's about drug addiction. But it eats and never gets satisfied. That's what Stefan's saying. The more it eats, the more hungry it gets. And sometimes this has been described as how it feels to be addicted to a substance. You know, you have to keep taking it, and you take it, you don't get full, you don't get satisfied by taking it, you just need more. But I mean, is that a fair comparison for simply an acceptance or an understanding of things such as the paranormal and the spiritual?
It hasn't worked, right? Trying to get male attention for you has not worked.
Yeah.
And it won't.
So you believe there is no such thing as kind of fate and something guiding us through life? Do you believe in that? Like, if the universe is guiding us through our journey?
How's the universe been guiding you? What the hell did you ever do to the universe that it would guide you like this?
He's referring now to her the problems she's had in life, which she talked about earlier in the film, in the interview. That is her split up from her husband, her eating disorders and things like that. And so you could say, well, this takes us back to the extreme elements of the law of attraction. Terrible things will happen to people, and the answer to that will either be, oh, there's no such thing as this law of attraction, it just doesn't exist. Or, oh my God, what have I done to myself? I've attracted this awful misfortune, aren't I bad? So, again, it's two polarities, it's two straw men.
I mean, if I thought that the universe had been guiding me by having me beaten up as a child and tortured and abused, I mean, fuck the universe. If that's the plan, fuck the plan. No, the universe is not guiding you. That's passive. And you can get by with passive because you're pretty. You can get by with thinking there are vibrations and the universe and that because you've got men chasing you around like a dog after an ice cream truck.
And there we are. See, he's gone back to these derogatory statements about men. I mean, you may think this is a derogatory statement about women, but this is really, the criticism here is against men. And I think I don't know, maybe he's speaking for himself. Maybe he is the kind of man who just looks at every woman and he notches, oh, that's 1, 2, 3, you know, puts her on the scale and then says, well, I might like talking to her, I may be enjoying this conversation, but basically all I want to do is get into her knickers. And he says, go temporarily insane until we've made a baby, and that's the only reason I'm having anything to do with her. When in fact the sexual interaction is far richer, it's far more subtle and complex than that. and he's belittling men. He really is. I mean, even I think this is not unlike what some more radical feminists say. The people who Stefan has actually done a good job opposing and contradicting and fighting back against and diffusing, and then he comes out with the same line.
Right?
At
It's
the
not
moment,
a
I'm very
value
close.
that you are bringing. Look, tell me this. This is all you need to answer to me, Tanya.
Yes.
If you were 55 years old and 200 pounds, what would these men be doing?
All right, I think you've heard enough of that. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, so here we go. So it's 127.20. I listened to this before and made notes. 127.20. Go back a bit. Here we go.
You need to become more virtuous, more sensible. You need to not...
Virtue is another word he often uses, and it refers to simply it's behaviour that's basically correct, especially in terms of ethically correct. And as he said, virtue is a big mean bastard with a big stick. It's not fluffy bunnies and doves, but maybe not. But I sometimes think he uses the stick a bit too much. And certainly in the last film, my last reply to him, I think he overused the stick quite considerably. He used it on people I don't think deserve it, and he's done that several times.
go down this foggy, narcissistic rabbit hole of the universe cares about you.
Foggy, narcissistic rabbit hole. My goodness me. Not an argument, Stefan.
The universe does not care about you, Tanya. Penises care about you because they want to make more penises. Or vaginas. Yeah, they don't.
Which is not a bad thing.
Again, I think maybe he's speaking from experience here. I mean, oh dearie me. I mean, that's it. So it's we are basically walking reproductive organs, are we? Is that all we are? Like the ones in the Heliconia trilogy, which Brian Aldiss wrote, where they actually, it's funny because it's a science fiction story where some people actually create beings which are literally just massive reproductive organs, and there's no, they have nothing else.
Actually.
I'm sorry?
I mean, so they want to have more humans. Stuff what you say, which is not a bad thing. So they make.
You are mistaking personal value for sex appeal. Or
hang on, he's just repeating himself now. Yeah, I'll skip forward to the last bit.
You are mistaking sex appeal for personal value.
Stefan didn't want just sex.
Oh,
Each other
okay,
enough.
I'll just go forward to. She talks about her relationships and that. 144.50. I'll just go back to one. No, they ramble on about something irrelevant, and then it comes up again at the end, right at the end. Here we go, at the end of this. One moment, ladies and gentlemen, bear with me. Sometimes it takes a while to sort these different segments out.
And I'm saying this to you not because I want you to self-attack or anything like that, but if you think everything you do is right, you'll end up just following your heart off a cliff and blaming the universe as you fall forever.
Yes.
And that's what...
But she hasn't done
Magic is the theft of choice. Mysticism is the thief of will. And the supernatural is the vampire of responsibility.
He's got away with words, hasn't he? But as I've explained, that's simply not true, simply not fair. It might be in the case of, say, in the case of an extreme New Ager, like I've said. But for him to bring this up in the middle of this conversation is, I think, a straw man. And again, he has to play for the audience, so he has to whittle down the various factors in order to maybe to produce some kind of program that he wants when he's talking to somebody. But for the guest, it must be very frustrating to be caught in this process that is essentially Stefan's program, and they're calling it his program. However, I would get very frustrated with that. I'd want to go off into other tangents. I'd want to explore the areas that he talks about which I disagree with in more detail. And you can't, because I suppose he wanted to keep it on a certain He wanted to keep it in a certain siding, perhaps, and not let it get derailed, to use a railway analogy, because then it would become maybe a different programme to the main theme of the programme that he wants to present in the middle of this conversation. However, in order to do that, I think you can get trapped in falsehood, and I think that's what he's done. He has created a discussion which in a sense is almost at cross purposes. It is one that is in which the truth actually is watered down, to put it mildly, and that's disappointing. I mean, I do like Stefan in many ways. I mean, I obviously, you know that I'm always watching him on his programmes. I do like what he does. I'll send him a donation when I can afford it. I do whenever I can afford it. I send him a donation. But he's not perfect, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I've many criticisms of him. Now, let's go back to the radio show where that particular interview came from. Because the one I just showed you is actually on YouTube as well, but it's part of a call-in show called FDR 3851 Help, a Turkish wizard casts magic spells on me, referring to that particular interview. But there's another interview, it's the one before. It is the second caller. It is the second caller of the night, and I won't play you much of this, because not much, can you see me? I've got enough light. I won't play you much of this, but it is relevant to what it is somewhat relevant to what we're talking about here, and also partly the last one he did, the video I made last week. So maybe I should have included it on that video. I'm not sure, but have a listen anyway.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have Dan. Dan wrote in and said, "When I was little, I have clear memories of being very young, toddler or just after, and making up stories. I went on to draw pictures and create more and more elaborate stories. Then, when I was 10, Star Wars came out, and my dad died a couple years before. My mom, feeling guilty or just out of unconditional love, bought me tons of the associated action figures and vehicles. At that point, I pretty much slowly moved into my imagination. I had two lives, one in my head with a cast of characters and all kinds of amazing heroic stories and situations, and the other real one that basically I went through the motions with. At any point, I can just sit there and go off into my imagination. It's easy to do and fun. However, the people I should have a better connection to are suffering. When things get stressful, I essentially leave to a place I have complete control over. I've gone to a therapist, and that's helped, but I simply can't seem to leave my imagination and be as present as I should. My wife and kids need a full-time husband and dad, and while I understand that, this habit is hard to break."
Now, I'm not going to play you the entire interview because they go off in all kinds of areas about Dan's past and Dan's relationship with his own parents. Stefan always wants to bring up your past. Whenever you interview him and you say you've got problems in your adult life, he says, well, what was your childhood like? And he has a scale of adverse childhood experiences as well, and you often find that things that happened when you were a kid is related to what's happening now. And indeed that's true. Childhood experience does change the adult life very, very much. Now, the point here is, I think, I felt a certain affinity with Dan because I am like him in a sense that I have a very, very active imagination. And I had when I was a little kid, I used to fantasize all the time. And I had an imaginary world, and I still up to a point do have imaginary worlds as well. And I don't think that's unusual. A lot of people are like that. And then I think this is the reason why I've become a fiction writer. And Stefan asked at one point to Dan, why don't you write a book? Use your imagination to write a book. And Dan has never written a book, which I think is unfortunate, and I think it is a deficit on his part, because it is a good way of actually making a use of this gift that he has. However, it's a bit. Stefan contradicts himself actually, because at the end he goes off into a bit of a rant, and he lays into people who are too detached from reality. and he says there's a difference between imagination and fantasy, or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact words. I'm not going to find it now, but he does say effectively the difference between being an imaginary or being what I forgot the terms used, being able to imagine and being lost in fantasy. But then, about a week after he did this call-in show, he did an entire program, not a call-in program. He did an entire program about J.R. Tolkien. J.R. Tolkien is one of the finest writers in the English language, certainly in the modern day. And his books, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Silmarillion, these books about Middle-earth, were only created because Tolkien was essentially an immersion fantasist. He was a man who lived in an internal imaginary world. We know this because of the work he did on Middle-earth. His books, The Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and the other, they were set on in an imaginary world, which we call Middle-earth. It was a world inhabited by various creatures, the hobbits, the dwarfs, and the elves, and there's nasty creatures such as the Shelob and the Balrog and things like that. Of course, a lot of fantasy stories, all fantasy stories to a certain extent, are set in an imaginary world which the author has invented. But I don't think any writer ever went to the extent that Tolkien did in their creative detail. Tolkien's imaginary world, he wrote lots and lots about his imaginary world, the Middle-earth, and he designed it in far greater detail than was actually necessary to tell the stories. If you look at there's like histories of Middle-earth and gazetteers and geographies of all the various places, including situations and places and times that do not appear anywhere in the main narratives of his novels. He dedicated his whole life to creating a non-existent world, to the point where it almost takes on a kind of existential existence of its own, because for him it was as real as this world. People who do this, who can go off into imagination, he says, look here, what's the word he used? Dan in a sense is a bit too self-critical. He says, I moved into my imagination. I had two lives, one in my head with a cast of characters, all kinds of heroic stories and situations, and the real one I went through. I could just sit there and go off into my imagination. It's easy and fun to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, if people didn't do that, they wouldn't, well, books would still be written, but they wouldn't be half as good. And I agree with Stefan's idea when he says, go and write a bloody book then. And this guy should go and write a book. How long have we been talking through it? Surely not an hour and 17. Bloody hell, this is a long one. Sorry, I didn't think it'd be that long. It makes me it makes me very annoyed, actually, when people like this get given such trouble, they're given such a hard time. Now, where is it? Let me just find, I had a page here I was looking at. Where is it? Right, no, sorry, I closed this. I closed this page. Here it is. Right, right, here we go. Now, this is I'm going to talk about Big Brother, the TV show. Now, Big Brother 8. There's one of the housemates is called Jonty Stern, and he's become famous in many other areas because I think he ran for Parliament once. Yeah, he stood as a Liberal Democrat candidate in council elections in the London Borough of Barnet. Now, Jonty, I remember Jonty. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't actually watch Big Brother regularly, but I got into it with Sue when I was going out with Sue, because Sue and I started watching them on YouTube, the old ones on YouTube, and we came up with some new ideas about the series, which I don't have time to go into here. But this guy Jonty Stern, he's really an amazing character. He's a sort of bookish look like him, but bald head and glasses. Well spoken. He comes from London. He's well spoken. Got a slight Welsh accent. He actually originally comes from Cardiff, and he now lives in London. And he does tours. He runs his own business doing tours, but they're kind of like alternative tours, and they're a bit more eccentric than the usual tours. And he's involved with Sealand, which is like it's an old oil rig off the coast of Essex, which has declared itself an independent state. He's involved with that as well, which I really like the idea of microstates and things like that. And he's very, very clever. I mean, he's a Jewish guy, and he can speak Yiddish. He can also speak Welsh. And he went to Lampeter University. He went to the University of St David's, University of Wales, Lampeter, which is where I used to live. And so he's intelligent. You know, he's bright. He can learn. And but he's extremely eccentric. For instance, when he went into Big Brother, he had this little. It was a toy. It's like a cuddly toy, and it's like a little ape. A little sort of simian cuddly toy, and he calls it Munkety Tunkety, and it's like he's like a cuddly toy, like a little kid. He does other little things that are quite childlike, and he has several other cuddly toys and things like that. And it reminds me of Deborah Scheiman, this lady. I made a video about it about bear sack. You know, I don't know if you remember my video, Find Bear Sack Now. And bear sack is she's a mutual friend of Heidi, another friend I have who I've talked about before. And she knows this woman, Deborah Scheiman, and I got in touch with Deborah Scheiman when she lost her little teddy bear. Because she's a grown woman with a teddy bear. And it's really, I think it was quite annoying for me when I watched Big Brother 8 with Sue. Because they always have a psychologist in the backstage of Big Brother. So Davina is always like talking to this guy who sort of gets inside people's heads and things like that. And this psychologist was commenting on Jonty and saying, strange case of all kinds of complexes here. God, I can't stand these bloody shrinks. I really can't. Yes, he has these little toys with him because basically he thinks he's being rebellious and he wants to break out because the society doesn't accept him. So it's a statement of rejection of society and all sorts of bullshit like this. And I just thought to myself, you know, no one. It's only the people like him who ever get this kind of treatment from the psychologists. And why is that? Why is it it's only non-conformists who have any explaining to do? You never ever have some knobhead from the Tavistock Institute come in on the Big Brother and saying, you know, well, that particular character, he seems to be awfully normal. He seems to be pretty conventional every single way, and we've got to ask ourselves why he is so keen to get into this mentality where he really thinks he just wants to be, he doesn't want to rock the boat and he wants to be as normal as possible, so he, you know, and things like that. You never ever have that. People who obey all the norms of society, including, well, some norms are necessary and others are not, including all the unnecessary, trivial, fashionable passing norms, the ones that change with every generation. The people who obey all those in order to be as normal as possible, which is what psychopaths do, incidentally. So that's one thing. That's one thing about psychopaths. They're always very, very conventional. Anyway, you say, well, that person, my point is that people like that never get the couch treatment, do they? Never. You never question. If you're conformist, no one ever asks you why you're a conformist. They just give you a pat on the back and say, well done. Golf clap to this guy. He's completely and utterly ordinary. Isn't it wonderful? I wish everybody could be like him. This is the person you've got to look up to and emulate, okay? Can you be like him? Could you be as normal as that guy, please? Because then you'll be a success. And that leads me on to another subject. I don't have time to go into that in more detail now. I think I've covered it in previous videos in various different ways. But anyway, that's my latest. That's the latest. I think I'll leave Stefan alone for a while now. I'm sure I can make videos about other subjects than Stefan Molyneux. I'm not obsessed with the guy. I don't have him going around my head all the time going not an argument, sexual market value, resources, virtue. No, I don't have that. You know, I don't have that kind of relationship with Stefan. It's just sometimes I feel the need to talk to him, and in this case, this is kind of a backlog. of subjects that I've needed to talk to when it comes to him. So my next video, I promise, will not be about Stefan Molyneux. Okay, I can guarantee that. So you can keep watching my channel in comfort and safety. Thank you for watching Her Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.